Kick off. Welcome, baseball fans, wherever you are, to another episode of the Highland Bullpen Baseball Podcast. We're now almost 10%, for those that like to look at it in those terms, of the way through the MLB season, with our teams respectively having played 16 or 17 games. Probably too early to make a really informed call about how we'll do, but it's early enough, I think, for us to get a sense from some of the Bullpen Bros about what the rest of the season holds in store for them. So let's kick off with someone who seems to think he might already know what the rest of the season has in store, our resident Chicago White Sox fan, Dave Jr.
Thanks, Richard. It's like when you go to a gig and there's just this terrible band on first, building up to the main event. So yeah, you might as well start things off with the worst team in baseball history. We've not quite carried that through to this year, but it's not been a great start either. I caught up with Dave offline a few days ago, and one of the stats that I provided him was after 12 games of the season, it's not great news when you're already on an 8-game losing streak. I mean, it's quite something when you think about it. A kind of poor start to the season. Alan's Tigers swept us on our visit over to Detroit. The Twins and Cleveland all we took a real pasting off of the American League Central teams as we did last year. And then again, maybe I'm going by the big market things, but we came up against Dave's Red Sox, and I think he used the term, Dave was very generous beforehand that it might be a bit closer, and I thought it might be the massacre of Massachusetts, but we managed to actually win the first 2 games to get our first series win of the year. The third game, I'll maybe leave Dave to talk about later, because that was actually really quite interesting. But there's been a lot of signs there for the White Sox that it's not been as bad as last year. We've pretty much competed in all of our games. I think perhaps one blowout against the Tigers. Even then, I think it was 7-2. The other games, most of the games we've lost have all been by the odd run. So there's a lot of good things to see this year. We're still certainly not a team that's going to be competing to get out the division, unfortunately. When you do look at the division, we are in the top 5, which is pretty solid. That's 2 years in a row we've finished top 5, if things carry on the same. But we're in the middle of a series just now against the Athletics, where we took a real hammering last night at home. And Jackie Robinson Day, which we'll go on to cover later. A couple more games before we make our way back over to Boston for a follow-up. But yeah, much of a muchness for the White Sox. But we're really blooding some rookies in the last few weeks, and it's an interesting time to be a White Sox fan. There's a lot of chat about the ownership structure as well, which seems to be changing. So yeah, roll on. Yeah, I think it's going to be this pretty much for the rest of the season, Richard.
Which is pretty much how he called it. I remember before that the season got underway as well. But we'll watch with interest to see if the White Sox can maybe defy expectations. A team that's perhaps already defying expectations, although probably not those of our resident optimist Al, are the Detroit Tigers, who have made a very promising start to the 2025 season.
Have you ever met someone from the Highlands who's not an optimist, Richard, or full of life and upbeat personality? It's all going, all good. Just watched another torque bomb on the TV just now as well, number 6 for the season. So yeah, it's good to see. The bats have been a wee bit colder in the last few days. But I was actually having a look at that because I think we talked about torque at the start of the season. It was great year 2 years ago. Struggled last year, and lots of people questioning what he would do. So his OPS was round about the 1,000 mark, which I think is pretty decent. It's only decent for a Tiger, drawing lots of walks. Actually did a little bit of research because I think that's home run number 55, and I thought, well, I wonder how they've been split out. Now, I've only just done it this afternoon, so I maybe need to check a wee bit. But 55 home runs, 20 different ballparks when you include Comerica, so 20 of 30. That's quite interesting. You would think, would it? He's got a good spread there. Does it? I mean, does that? I don't know. Does that reflect the fact that teams get to know what he likes in certain places? I don't know. It's one of those interesting baseball stats. So home runs against 23 different teams now. I think don't think he'd homered against the Brewers before. So good old Torque. I stayed loyal to him at the start of the season, and he's repaying us a bit there as well. The Tigers, fantastic start. As I said, going a wee bit cold on the bats. I think they're 4-1 down just now in the fifth, so potentially staring at a third consecutive defeat, which would take them to 10-8. Still, the sort of result we'd be happy with. But yeah, 10-5 after the last series against the Twins, which they won as well, was good. They swept the White Sox. Obviously lost series against the Dodgers as well. But yeah, no, it's good. They're mixing things up a wee bit. They took this guy Kaiser Montero back into pitching tonight. You start to understand the strategy of moving around the pitching changes and that a little bit more when you've actually got a team who you think might compete and might win their division. Makes a big difference. I mean, up until 9 months ago, we probably didn't worry too much about what the Tigers were doing, but now it's a serious challenge in there. The other guy probably worth mentioning as well, Tarek Skubal in pitching. Bit of a rockier start. Sort of looking at the outings, he lost to the Dodgers in the opening series, and yeah, he's going to get the ball in the first game. That makes sense, but that was a tough one against the Dodgers, and you think, do they put them up? You put your top guy up against the big teams? But just depends on the rotation. But he's come back. He had 2 nice wins. I think he went into the 7th innings the other day. So he's now 2-2 for the season. This is game 18. So it's good. There's a wee bit of chat about how the top 5 teams percentage-wise were all in the National League. And I don't know, the bit I was reading was trying to say it's a strong league. There's a lot of good teams there, but it's actually quite tight in the American League. And again, do we know enough about the game? But that, to me, is not necessarily an indication of a poor quality. It's good competition there. Yes, unfortunately, there might be 1 or 2 teams dropping off in the American League, but it's good to see. Although when I talk about the National League, and it's not our area of expertise, the Dodgers are down in 3rd place, which we probably didn't really expect. I'm sure they'll come good. But yep, Tigers. I think I predicted they'd be just above 500 by the end of the season. Pretty much on course for that, if not a wee bit better just now. So yeah, let's keep it going in Detroit. Let's get those bats a wee bit hotter. It'd be nice to pick up a win tonight. I've seen Bernie twice tonight. I know Yorkshire Dave will appreciate that. I didn't quite appreciate it at the time, and I don't think he bothered for Torque's Torque bomb. So yeah, good to see him live in action.
Good stuff, Al. Good stuff. Well, while your team are on the right side of 500 so far, Boston Red Sox are very close to 500, but just at the moment on the wrong side of that margin. But Yorkshire, Dave, have you seen enough in those opening games? And actually, the Red Sox are a little bit further ahead. I think their next game will be their 20th of the season so far. To suggest, are you going to end up in a good place, or do you think 500 might be as good as it gets?
I'm still very hopeful, but it's very much been a mixed bag so far. As you say, they're one game under 500, which it's not really a problem at this stage of the season. Just a couple of games by the third in the division. But yeah, they had an opening loss, series 4-game series loss in Arlington against the Rangers, and then of course they lost on the road to Dave's in the battle of the Soxes, but they did get a good division win in Baltimore, and they swept the Cards at home. But then it shows you how tough it's going to be because they lost 3 out of 4 at home to the Blue Jays. But the big positives really is the sort of 2 major signings they made, and they definitely have got an ace in Garrett Crochet, and they've actually signed him up to a 6-year extension. It's worth reportedly a whopping great 170 million for a 6-year extension. It's a record by some distance for a pitcher with at least 4 years service. Apparently, it's a darn good deal, whichever way you look at it. And as Dave alluded to in game 3 of the Battle of the Soxes, he was carrying a no-hitter into the 8th inning, I think it was. And then who should stop him by getting a hit was one of the 4 prospects that went over to Chicago in the trade, and he was actually the 3rd rated out of the 4 prospects behind catcher Kyle Teal and the outfielders at Braden Montgomery. And this lad's he's a young, he's 23, but he looks a lot younger, doesn't he? He's Chase Mydroth, and he was playing shortstop as well, I think, at one stage. And he was the one after 7 1/3 innings that took the no-hitter away from Garrett Crochet. And what a start to the season he's had. I've just listened to a little bit of a White Sox podcast, and he had a hit and walked 3 times on his debut. That was his 4 at-bats. And then he had a hit in his 5th plate appearance, and no one else has ever done that for the Chicago White Sox in their history to start the season. So good on him. And the other positive is our third baseman, Alex Bregman, who he's a class act, Gold Glover, All Star, and he's batting well. I think he's average 321, which went up a fair bit yesterday. He went 5 for 5, which is apparently the first time he's ever done that in his distinguished career. So yeah, and his on base plus slugging is nearly, it's 0.929. So there are lots of positives, but I think they are just a little bit inconsistent. They're still having problems with their defense, but they've got a mixture between young guys, real young guys. They've got a great rookie, Christian Campbell, who got on base in his first 17 games, which is not quite a franchise record. There's one guy ahead of him, but he beat, and I think this is the first time I'm going to mention him this series, but he beat Ted Williams, who only reached base in his first 15 games in 1939. So again, there's lots of positives, and I'm sure that the team of the young players and the veterans will knit together, and I'm confident that we'll be above 500, challenging for the AL East and the playoffs. So I'll just a couple of crochet puns in there for you. I'm going to try and get a few more in next episode.
I'm sure they had the listeners in stitches. Don't worry about that, Yorkshire Dave. But great to hear for Fenway fans. Still a lot to look forward to, clearly, in the games to come. And from a Seattle perspective, on the other coast, quietly happy. I know that might sound a little bit over the top, given we like the Red Sox are currently just a game below 500, but we've managed to get series wins over our division rivals. You know, we swept the Rangers and we edged the series against the Astros. So looking to the season ahead, I take that as a really promising sign. In the event that we end up in a position where we're tied with either of those teams in any way, obviously the head-to-head record comes into play as well. So it's good to get some wins against division rivals in the bag as well. A wee bit surprised at how well the A's have done, how well the Angels have done. And Texas Rangers, I think, look like they'll be formidable this year as well. And you can never write off the Astros. But in general, fairly positive start. Very unfortunate injury to Victor Robles, apart his incident crashing into the net and dislocating his shoulder. Rob does have his services for a while as well. But on the plus side, there's good news about George Kirby, apparently kind of needing a return, stepping up his rehabilitation, and as a key part of one of the most impressive pitching rotations in baseball. I think that'll be a real boost once he's available again as well, because Louis Castillo, who had not his best night last night against the Reds in that defeat, traditionally he heats up as the weather heats up. He always takes a bit of time to get going, but once he gets a bit of sun coming out in kind of the later spring into early summer, he's tended to find his best stuff as well. So definite positives for the Mariners as well. But while the here and now's always important, this has been very much a couple of days about history in baseball, with baseball MLB uniting to honour Jackie Robinson Day, always one of the most important days of the baseball calendar as well. And as a Mariners fan, before we bring in some of the bros for your own reflections on this day, I'm always quite proud that a lot of this modern tradition stems from Ken Griffey Jr., who was the first to ask for the honour of wearing that 42 in tribute to Jackie Robinson, reversing the 24 numbers, which he wore throughout his Seattle career. And then after Ken Griffey Jr. was given the opportunity and got the green light to do that, that was then adopted as a tradition that baseball has followed over the past 2 decades as well. So nice to have a Seattle connection to one of the most important moments and events in baseball history and in America's social history as well. But I know you guys all have your own reflections on Jackie Robinson Day, and I'll maybe start off by heading back to Yorkshire, Dave, for your own thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's a huge moment in the early days of the season, isn't it? You know, we're only 2 or 3 weeks in, and it is a big moment indeed. My reflection is really, so my first ever visit to Fenway in Boston was in 1993. So it was 4 years before the number was retired throughout baseball, and the significance of that number would have been lost on me then, really. But of course, we're all aware now of the history and the legacy of the trailblazer that was Jackie Robinson. And quite recently, I was looking back at some of the photographs, proper photographs in an album I took at the time, and I noticed that our big power hitting first baseman at the time, Mo Vaughn, was wearing the number 42. And so I've been looking into what happened when the number was retired, and I'll pass the article on to you. There's a great MLB article about this, which features the club's last player, each club's last player to wear the 42 jersey. And yeah, although the number was officially retired in 1997, it was agreed that the players who were currently wearing the number would be able to continue to do so until they retired, if they chose to do. And of course, the Red Sox Mo Vaughn did exactly that. The man known as the Hit Dog throughout his 8-year career with the Red Sox, he wore the number 42 in honor of Robinson, who was his hero. And he also wore the number again when he played for the Mets. And Vaughn was the last black player in MLB history to have 42 as his uniform number. The AL's most valuable player in 1995. He belted 230 homers in his career and had a 936 OPS for the Red Sox. So, and he has the distinction of being the last to wear the 42 for 3 different clubs. The Red Sox, the Angels, and the Mets, who he played for a few years after he left Boston. So Yeah, you couldn't have really predicted how my interest in the game would have developed from that over 30 years ago. But it was great to look back on, and I could just notice that number 42, and just wondered, you know, how the history of it had developed and retired. So yeah, that was a great article. I'll pass it on to you guys, and you can check out your own sort of club's last player.
No, that's a great shout. And also, actually, just reflecting there, as you said that, also well worth checking out for those who haven't seen the movie 42. I know we've talked a lot about good baseball movies over the
Yeah.
years, and that one
Yeah.
starred a fantastic performance by the late and much missed Chadwick Boseman as well. So definitely well worth catching up on that while we're in a kind of Jackie Robinson reflection place. But Dave Jr., what's your own thoughts on the legacy and the activity around about Jackie Robinson Day?
I love it, Richard. Every year it seems to strike me in a slightly different way. Again, it's sometimes I feel a bit of a fraud coming in and liking baseball at this stage of my life. So many North Americans have perhaps grew up with it since birth, and I think Jackie Robinson would mean more to them, or more to people of colour as well, if I'm being just kind of blunt about it. Whereas I come in as a bit of a tourist and think this is quite cool. This is really good. It's really modern. But given that it's been going on for quite some time, I often wonder how it would resonate in the UK if you were to try something across any UK sports, like cricket, football, rugby. I often wonder if it would work, or if our kind of pessimistic nature would maybe kill it off a bit. To come back to your question, I still just love the whole day in total. But one of the silly little nuances I like seeing the guys, the fashion that they sport on the day. So last night it was a game between the Athletics and the White Sox, and they've all got their own little version of how to sport that 42. Like, some of them just had really funky colours on, but again, the colours would then sort of marry up and show 42. And I don't know if that spilt out across all 30 teams, if it was just that design for this year. But every player, a little bit like Mother's Day, Father's Day, all these days are really celebrated well by the MLB. Armed Forces Day. I'm sure there's many other days I'm forgetting about, but the players seem to always get invested, and it doesn't seem to become a political point. It's just what they do, and I think they do it really, really well. I'm sure that we come from a country, perhaps not the FA in England, though Dave might correct me, but the SFA from our footballing landscape are quite often pilloried for just about everything they do. Our footballing authorities, and I'm sure the MLB don't get a lot of things right, but for me, as that tourist, dropping into it at my stage in life, they seem to get a lot right. They really do things well. I don't know if that's a mixture of the clubs and the fans all just becoming involved, but there seems to be a lot right about the MLB. Jackie Robinson Day kind of epitomises that. I think it sits at the top of the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they do a very good job in general with the history of the game, from the whole bit about Cooperstown to honouring great moments, in the history of the game in a way that perhaps other sports could learn a little bit from, and perhaps other countries, as you say, Dave Jr. as well. But Alan, what do you reckon to the significance in this year's Jackie Robinson Day?
Yeah, I thought quite a few interesting points from Dave there. And when you talk about the history in Cooperstown, I think it would be appropriate to mention the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas. And I think, I don't know when my next trip to watch the Tigers would be, but Kansas would be a good option, and to go and see the museum would be good. Really good point about how everyone. I mean, it's one of those things everybody should celebrate and be involved in. I think it's a great reason to go and see and participate in a game that day sometime. I think British sport or football, I'm pretty sure we would end up in a situation where people would add their rivalries into it. I'm sure the Dodgers have have got a little bit more emphasis on Jackie Robinson Day, perhaps, than other teams. But it's a universal thing, and I think the way we do sport as a fan-based thing is not as universal in recognising things like this. We would find some way of bringing rivalry into this, and I think even in a divided political world, people with different opinions, baseball fans deserve a lot of credit for their ability to support and enhance, as Dave was saying there as well, enhance something that's so important to be celebrated and to continue to be celebrated. I loved all the stuff Yorkshire Day was talking about there in terms of numbers as well, and the history of the number. And I wonder, Ross County just now have a guy who wears number 42. He's a Liberian international footballer. I'm not sure if he's got any interest in baseball, but every time I see him, I sort of think, well, I wonder. You've got to assume in MLS somebody's picked up the 42 number and they wear it for that reason. Long gone are the days of number 1 to 11 with 12 and 13 on the bench. So maybe worth sort of trying to check out if any of our other sporting heroes have chosen that number for that reason as well, because I think that would deserve some credit as well. And it's probably, Dave talked about the different days there, and along with like your Veterans Day and that, it's got to be up there as the main days that are rightly celebrated and need to continue to be celebrated as well.
Absolutely. Some really important points you make there, Al, as well. And I totally agree about baseball fans, their love, regardless of their support for their own teams, but their love for the game, I think, allows them to properly recognise and celebrate Jackie Robinson Day and other things of great significance in a way that sadly, in our world where incredibly every football fan appears also to be a geopolitical expert, we seem unable to just unite around the one thing we do all have in common, a love for the game. And maybe as well, in what is a tumultuous time, it's important to remember that the advances for and won by Jackie Robinson and others are not won forever, and actually reminding all of us each year about the importance and the strides that have been taken forward is even more important, because strides can be taken backwards as well as forwards as well. So I am, however, still astonished at the notion someday that Liberia to Dingwall pipeline is still going strong, Alan. I'm sure he's noticed no difference at all between Monrovia and Dingwall. I'm sure temperatures and culture and all the rest of it very similar, but clearly you're a lot more exotic. Your football teams or your soccer teams are a lot more exotic than I'd previously realised, Alan. So that was good to learn as well. And as
best Liberian player in the Premiership, I would say.
Oh, no, I don't doubt that for a moment. I don't doubt that for a moment, Al. But Al, you're also famously a man for the numbers and the stats. You keep us right on these important matters. And I believe you've been taking an early season look at how our various bullpen teams have been doing it against each other so far.
Yeah, there's been a few games. I think there's been 3 different series, three game series. The White Sox and the Tigers have been involved in a couple, and the Red Sox and the Mariners have been involved in one. I'm only going to mention this at this stage of the season, because of the current scores. But in essence, of our 4 teams, 3 of them are sitting on 333, whereas one of them is at 833. Which surprisingly, given I'm mentioning it, is the Detroit Tigers. As Dave Jr. mentioned earlier, a sweep against the White Sox and a series win against the Red Sox puts the Tigers with 5 wins from six games. So an impressive start, one that we've got a chance of holding on to. And yeah, the runs have been scored at that point, 33 runs. Fair play. It's probably look at the White Sox as well. So they're the Mariners and the Red Sox both have a negative run differential, but the good old White Sox in their 6 games have got a balanced 24 runs conceded. That might well be to do with one big win against the Red Sox, which is potentially going to hamper them a little bit as well. But I will keep an eye on that, because that's the real prize for the season, obviously. None of the who cares about the playoffs. It's a 4-man division, so we can do it. And also, I've just been charting the cumulative score for the bullpen. So yeah, that's just we'll pass the 70 games between us all tonight, and it's 0.449 just now. It's it's been sort of leveling off. I should expect it to level off through time. Probably the only thing I would say on that is fever teams are sort of comfortably above the 449, but one of them is a wee bit below it, which is maybe dragging our overall score down there as well. But yeah, nice wee stats to keep us a little bit interested in how the whole bullpen is doing, because that's where the prizes are at.
Oh, when it comes to spreadsheets, Al, you're a very own Ted Williams. You're always the top, the very top of the tree when it comes to that kind of stuff. So thank you very much for that. And I'm sure it's just coincidence that the Tigers are tearing the rest of our teams apart as to why you were quite so keen to have that section closing this week's Highland Bullpen Baseball
The listeners would
podcast.
want to hear about that, Richard.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, on that bombshell note, we will leave you for this week, but we look forward to joining you again on the next episode of the Highland Bullpen Baseball Podcast.